Hey, what's up, everybody? Wade Watches here, coming at you with another fresh out of the movie theater review. I just got through watching the 10th anniversary re-release of Interstellar in IMAX, and firstly, let me just say I'm very happy right now. I'm very grateful and thankful that they decided to re-release this film for its 10th anniversary. 15-year-old me just got some redemption because, fun fact, little short story here, this is actually one of the first movies that I attempted to sneak into when it originally came out in 2014. I tried to sneak it to the IMAX theater. That didn't work out, had to settle for seeing it in a standard theater. But 10 years later, finally got to see it in IMAX, and I'll just go ahead and say this about it. This was definitely worth checking out in this format. Lived up to all my expectations, lived up to all my hopes and dreams. It was better than I could have ever imagined in IMAX. Loved the experience, loved the way it looked on the big screen, loved the way it sounded, loved it when my seat shook from like just that IMAX bass. So it was definitely great in that format. Moving on to the story itself. It's one of those things where, in 2014 when this came out, 15-year-old me wasn't reviewing movies, so I didn't know how to necessarily put my how I felt into words, how to fully articulate it. But I review movies now on YouTube, so I kind of know how to articulate myself a little bit better. And I will say that there's really two stories here. There's the big epic story that's obviously deals with the fate of mankind and saving mankind and going on this epic space journey for the sake of saving mankind. And then there's that small intimate story, that small intimate father and daughter story. It's very reminiscent of very reminiscent of Robert Zemeckis' Contact. I know that's drawn like a lot of comparisons already, but also it's very reminiscent of Inception. So I was getting to that, Christopher Nolan's Inception, where this is definitely something that he does in these like mind-bending sci-fi epics where, of course, there's a bigger story, there's big earth-shattering consequences, but there's always like a smaller, more intimate, personal story. He continued that trend with this, and see, the bigger story is the main thing that works with this for me, just in my humble opinion. I loved it when it did talk about the fate of all of humanity. I loved it when it did kind of start out with this kind of and I saw in the credits that they did take inspiration from the Dust Bowl event, where it's just you're seeing that mankind is not in the best place. You're seeing that it's kind of a dystopia on Earth where there's dust storms, food sources are running out, and this crew, NASA, is pretty much sending people out into space to find an inhabitable solar system. I loved it when it dealt with that. However, when it dealt with the mother oh my God, when it dealt with that father and daughter story, which eventually at a point does kind of become the main story overall, I was just kind of like, okay, it's fine, it's okay, it's not terrible. Matthew McConaughey is acting his ass off here. He did tug at my heartstrings a bit because he really loves his daughter and wants to be with her. I don't want to give away too much or spoil too much, but that's what we have going on here. That worked in parts, but it didn't always work for me. Not fully, not all the time. I kind of did want it to go back to the sciencey stuff about the fate of the human species, just the fate of the human race, and it kind of abandons that at a certain point to deal with just this kind of smaller, intimate story. And one could argue that that's what Inception did as well, but I don't know. I felt like Inception just flowed better all in all, because that entire film dealt with trying to accomplish this one specific goal, this one specific heist, whereas this initially is all about the fate of humankind and trying to save that, but then it becomes about how just love is the strongest force in the universe. And I don't necessarily mind that message, and to be fair, I'm not going to be as hard on the film for having that as a central message as a lot of people were, because it manages to blend it in fairly well, to the point where it's not super sappy or overly cheesy, because again, some of that did tug at my heartstrings a little bit. But all in all, I just wasn't a fan with the that smaller story, that smaller personal story, hijacking the overall epic story, and kind of, taking away from that pretty, from those pretty high stakes. That's just my personal opinion. That's just how I feel about it. And, in turn, I wasn't really super happy about where it all eventually ended up. I wasn't the biggest fan of it. Parts of the ending work, parts of the conclusion work, where I was like, okay, I see what you're doing now. I see what you're trying to do. I kind of respect it. But all in all, So wrapping it up, Interstellar, again, like for the experience alone, for the IMAX experience itself, perfect, beautiful, amazing. It looks beautiful, sounds beautiful. It's all wonderful in that format. But for the story overall, it had its hits and it had its misses for me. So wrapping it up, I'm going to take a page out of Double Toasted's book. They did this in 2014 when they initially reviewed Interstellar. I'm going to go ahead and give Interstellar, the movie itself, I'm going to go ahead and give it an 8 out of 10. I was leaning towards 7.5, but there were parts of it that really did grip me and engage me. And, again, that intimate story that I wasn't the biggest fan of did tug at my heartstrings at parts. I'm not gonna lie. I don't have a heart of stone. I'm not the Grinch. I'm not Scrooge. It did get to me at parts, but again, I really would have rather that, kind of like stick the landing, stick to what it was definitely spent a good majority of its runtime building up. But 8 out of 10 for Interstellar, the movie. But you know what? I'll bump it up to a 9 out of 10 for Interstellar and IMAX because, again, it was definitely made for this format. It's no secret that Christopher Nolan is a huge devout fan of shooting on 70mm IMAX. It's the highest quality of film, and this movie looks gorgeous and beautiful in it. So 9 out of 10 for seeing Interstellar in IMAX, but 8 out of 10 for Interstellar, the film itself. But again, obviously, since I bumped it up just because of the screen I saw it on, definitely recommend you check this out because it is a limited engagement. It's not going to stay around for long, I guess, unless people petition for it to stick around for long. But as far as I know, it's like out by the end of this upcoming week. So check it out in Interstellar. Check Interstellar out in IMAX if you haven't seen it already in the format. I feel fulfilled by checking it out in the format, but the story itself, it's all right. It's all right. It tries. So those are my thoughts on Interstellar. This has been another Out of Theater review from Watches, and I will catch you all next time. Namaste.